The big arena lights blinked on and off, just like a heartbeat. The loud music thumped so loudly it made the whole place shake. Cameras moved around to catch everything. The crowd was huge and loud, cheering and shouting. Richard the Titan Torque was a big, strong wrestling star. He looked like a superhero. Richard walked into the ring like he was a king. He took off his shirt and showed off his big muscles. Then he held up his shiny title belt high in the air and shouted, "Nobody is better than the Titan." Bright lights followed Richard as he walked around the ring. He smiled a little and flexed his muscles. The people in the crowd yelled his name again and again. Richard loved the cheers. He felt like the best person in the whole arena. But then, something surprising happened. The big screen above the ring suddenly changed. The music stopped. The announcer's voice came on and said, "Now, please welcome our special guest, action star Jason Statham." The crowd got even louder. Everyone jumped up from their seats. The lights turned to the front row of the arena. There, sitting calmly in a black hoodie, was Jason Statham. He wasn't smiling or waving. He just nodded quietly and looked cool. Jason didn't make a big show. He didn't need to. Just being there made everyone excited. The crowd started yelling his name. "Jason! Jason! Jason!" It was so loud, it felt like the whole building was shaking. The cameras stopped filming Richard. Instead, they focused on Jason. Richard stood in the ring, surprised. His bright spotlight disappeared. His face got serious. He clenched his fists and took a deep breath. But the crowd didn't care about Richard anymore. They only wanted to see Jason. Richard grabbed a microphone and walked angrily to the ropes. He shouted, "Do you think this guy is the real hero? I own this ring." Then Richard jumped out of the ring and marched straight to Jason. "Get up, movie star!" Richard yelled. "Show us you're more than just a strong actor." But Jason stayed sitting quietly. He didn't move. The crowd cheered even louder for Jason. Finally, Jason stood up slowly. The challenge had started. The lights in the big Vegas arena blinked red, white, and gold. They flashed over 20,000 excited faces. The crowd was already buzzing with energy before the match even started. Teens in the front row leaned over the railings, holding their phones to record everything. They screamed with excitement. People selling t-shirts ran up and down the aisles. Bright lasers cut through the fog above the ring. Tonight was going to be a big fight. A legendary showdown. But everyone was here for one person, Richard the Titan Torque. When Richard's music played, the whole stadium exploded with cheers. Richard ran out from the tunnel. He was sweating and strong. His arms were wide, and his eyes looked like fire. The announcer shouted, "Make way for the undefeated Titan." Richard walked down the ramp with his gold belt shining on his shoulder. He flexed his muscles and hit his chest. He stepped into the ring like he owned it. He stood on the middle rope and looked around, loving all the attention. Fans yelled his name and took pictures. But Richard wanted even more attention. He grabbed a microphone from the announcer and shouted, "This ring belongs to real men, fighters and legends. Nobody can beat me." He roared loudly and flexed his muscles again. Most of the crowd cheered, but then the lights in the arena went dim. The big screen flickered, and the speakers popped. Then a voice boomed, "Now, a special guest appearance from the global action star Jason Statham." The lights switched to the front row, where Jason was sitting quietly. He wore a black hoodie and a low cap. He sat with his arms crossed and legs wide apart. No smile, no wave, just calm. The crowd went crazy. They cheered louder for Jason than they had for Richard. Phones lit up the arena like stars. The announcer stuttered, not knowing what to say. Teens in the front row jumped up and down, shouting, "Jason! Jason! Jason!" Richard stood frozen in the ring. His eyes stared at Jason. The spotlight that was on Richard disappeared. The crowd's noise for Jason swallowed everything else. One teenager in the front row yelled, "Hey Richard! Jason's the real hero." People behind him laughed and cheered. Richard's jaw tightened. He gripped the microphone hard. His breathing got heavy. The crowd wasn't paying attention to him anymore. The camera wasn't on him. The chants were only for Jason. Richard snapped. He jumped out of the ring and stomped toward the barricade. The microphone stayed in his hand as he pushed past the security guards like a storm. He reached Jason, who was still sitting calmly. "Do you think you're the hero now?" Richard growled. "You're stealing my moment, sitting there like a king." Jason didn't move. He didn't blink. The crowd shouted even louder. Richard leaned in close and whispered into the microphone, "Why don't you get off your Hollywood chair and prove you're more than just a script with muscles?" Richard stepped back, arms wide, yelling at the crowd, "Let's give the people what they want. You versus me. Right here. Right now." The arena held its breath. Jason slowly stood up. No words. Just calm power. The challenge was on. Jason stood still as Richard shouted, trying hard to get his moment back. But the crowd had already chosen. From the top of the arena to the front row, the chant came back, louder than before. "Jason! Jason! Jason!" It sounded like a battle cry. Teens waved their arms. Phones lit up the stands. Some fans jumped out of their seats, slapping the barricades. Jason slowly turned his head toward the ring. Then he stood up in one smooth motion. He unzipped his hoodie, took it off, and folded it carefully. He handed it to the security guard next to him. Underneath, he wore a plain black t-shirt. No logos. No brands. Just his strong muscles. No noise. Just quiet power. He climbed over the barricade. His feet hit the floor with a heavy sound. The whole stadium could feel it. He walked up the steel steps slowly and carefully. He paused at the ropes. Richard stood in the ring, bouncing on his feet. He grinned wide, but his eyes flickered with nervousness. Jason ducked through the ropes and into the ring. The bell rang. Richard charged at Jason before Jason could get ready. Richard's shoulder hit Jason's ribs hard, lifting him off the mat and smashing him into the turnbuckle with a loud thud. The crowd gasped. Richard didn't wait. He grabbed Jason's shirt and threw him across the ring like a rag doll. Then he charged again. He hit Jason's chest with his forearm. Jason hit the mat hard and coughed. Richard stood over him and flexed. "Is this your action hero? Is this your tough guy?" He shouted. The crowd started to get quiet. Jason tried to get up, but Richard grabbed him and slammed him back onto the canvas with a huge move called a suplex. Richard walked around the ring like a gladiator, raising his arms. He yelled, "Hollywood soft." The announcers whispered nervously, "Jason's in trouble. Richard is no stuntman. He's an animal. And he's just getting started." Jason rolled to the side and held his ribs. He had been hit hard. He had been hurt before many times, but Richard was strong and fast and hungry. Richard walked toward Jason with a smirk. "What's wrong, tough guy? Looking for the director? Forgot your lines." Richard dragged Jason up again and threw him into the ropes. Jason bounced back, and Richard jumped up to hit him with a clothesline. Jason spun and fell hard to the mat like a crash test dummy. Some fans winced. Others sat down. The teens who had been cheering Jason before were quiet now. Their faces showed doubt. Jason didn't get up fast. He sat on one knee, breathing hard. Sweat ran down his face. Richard crouched and grabbed the microphone. "This is your hero?" he asked. "This is the guy who plays killers on screen?" The crowd didn't cheer. Jason's chest went up and down as he breathed. He was still quiet and thinking. Richard walked closer, arms ready to grab Jason again. But Jason did not wait. He suddenly jumped up and hit Richard's ribs with his elbow. Richard grunted. Jason hit him again, this time under the chin. The crowd started to stir. Jason quickly moved out of the way when Richard threw a big punch. Then, Jason hit Richard hard in the stomach with his knee. Richard bent forward. Jason quickly hit Richard's chin with an uppercut, making Richard step back 3 times. The crowd started cheering loudly, shouting, "Jason! Jason! Jason!" Jason walked around, calm and focused. He had a little bit of blood on his lip, but his eyes were steady. Richard got mad and ran at Jason with a wild punch, but Jason moved to the side and grabbed Richard's wrist. Jason used Richard's own arm to flip him over his hip and throw him onto the mat. The kids watching screamed with excitement. Jason didn't smile or celebrate. He just got ready for the next move. Richard lay on the mat, looking surprised and blinking a lot. For the first time, Richard didn't look like he could win easily. The crowd was still excited from Jason's throw, but now they felt something had changed. Jason was calm and strong, like a hunter watching his prey. Richard got up quickly, red in the face and angry like a hurt bull. He ran at Jason again, throwing a big punch with all his muscle. Jason leaned back just a little and the punch missed. At the same time, Jason kicked Richard's leg hard and exactly where he wanted. Richard stumbled but kept going. Jason moved fast and hit Richard's ribs again with his elbow, the same place as before. Richard made a pained noise and held his side. Jason was now moving like a machine, smooth and sharp. He wasn't just fighting. He was carefully breaking Richard's moves apart. The crowd was jumping and watching closely. One announcer whispered, "He knows Richard's moves like a book." Richard tried to get close and tackle Jason, but Jason spun around him, grabbed his shoulder, and threw him face-first into the corner of the ring. The sound was loud, like a gunshot in the quiet arena. Richard bounced back and looked dazed. Jason caught Richard when he staggered and punched him hard in the belly. Richard stopped moving and dropped to one knee, trying to catch his breath. Jason walked around slowly, not rushing to finish the fight. Every punch and dodge was perfect, like he had practiced this many times. Richard looked up, confused, trying to find help in the crowd. Now he knew this was not luck. Jason was in control, and Richard was losing. Richard got up again, sweating and breathing hard. His confident walk was gone, replaced with nervous eyes and quick, wild moves. Then Richard suddenly pulled out a metal chair from under the corner of the ring. The crowd gasped. The referee ran toward Richard, but Richard pushed him away with his big arm. Richard raised the chair like an axe and charged at Jason. Jason stayed calm. He stepped aside, grabbed Richard's wrist holding the chair, and twisted it down. The chair fell to the floor before Richard could hit him. Jason then swept Richard's leg, making him fall flat on his back. The crowd went crazy. Richard tried to get up on all fours, but Jason kicked his shoulder hard, making him fall to the side. Then Jason hit Richard's ribs with his knee and his head with an elbow. Every hit was sharp and fast. Richard looked like a broken machine, strong but not steady. Richard tried to punch blindly with his left hand. Jason ducked under it, spun around, and hit Richard twice in the belly with quick punches. Richard gasped for air and his knees started to wobble. From the front row, one kid shouted, "You're done, Titan!" Jason didn't smile or say anything. He spun around as Richard tried to grab him. Jason pushed Richard hard into the ropes. When Richard bounced back, Jason kicked his leg fast and sent him crashing to the mat again. Now Richard stayed down, groaning and twitching. He reached out with his hands, not to fight, but to crawl to the ropes. Jason stood tall in the middle of the ring, breathing slowly and steady. The loud, proud Richard was now being broken by quiet, strong Jason. The crowd saw the truth. Richard was not the hero. Jason had proved it without saying a word. Richard tried to stand one last time, shaking and stumbling. Blood was on his mouth and chest, and he breathed heavily, angry and tired. He roared like a wild animal and swung one last big punch, using all his strength. But Jason didn't move. He waited and caught Richard's arm in midair. With a loud crack, Jason twisted Richard's arm behind his back and lifted it up, making Richard scream in pain. Richard kicked and tried to get free, but Jason pulled harder. Then Jason spun around and hit Richard's leg with his knee, making Richard fall down like a heavy pile. The crowd gasped. Jason didn't let go. He tightened his hold, and Richard's body jerked as he tried to tap out to stop the pain. But Jason didn't finish him. He let go of the arm. Richard slumped forward, breathing hard. Then suddenly, Jason stepped in and hit Richard's jaw with one final, strong punch. Richard's head snapped to the side and his whole body went limp. The arena exploded with cheers. Chairs rattled, fans screamed, and kids hugged each other. Even the announcers were quiet for a moment before they said, "He's out! The Titan is out!" Jason stood over Richard's unconscious body, chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. He was cut and bruised, but clearly the winner. The fight was over, not by luck, not by flash, but by control, by skill, by total power. This wasn't just a show. This was a real win. The arena was still and amazed. Richard Torque, the big Titan, lay on the mat with his arms and legs spread out like a fallen tree. Jason stood tall and calm, breathing through his nose. His eyes looked over the cheering fans who were now standing and chanting his name. Jason! 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 The referee waved his arms to end the match, but no one heard him because the crowd was so loud. Jason walked to the corner of the ring and picked up the microphone Richard had used to shout bad words. It crackled with static as Jason held it up. As he lifted the microphone to his mouth, he looked down at Richard, who was lying still on the ground. Then he looked at the surprised announcers and finally up at the loud crowd in the big stands. He spoke just 6 words, soft and calm, but they were heard all over the arena. Heroes don't need spotlights. He stopped for a moment and let those words hang in the air. Then he looked straight into the closest camera and said the last words. They take them. The crowd went wild. It wasn't just clapping. It was like a big explosion of cheers. Kids jumped on their chairs, grown-ups shouted loudly, and people shared everything on their phones right away. Jason dropped the microphone, but not like it was heavy. He just let it go like it was nothing. He didn't wait to talk to anyone or raise his hand for a high five. He didn't stop smiling for the cameras. He just stood tall, jaw tight, shoulders straight, and walked to the ropes. The announcers tried to say something, but the loud cheers covered their voices. Jason stepped out of the ring and walked up the ramp. The lights followed him. Not the champion, not Richard, who was still lying there with the belt beside him. Jason was already gone. When Jason went behind the curtain, the whole arena went crazy. The lights went a little dim, but the noise was so loud it hurt your ears. The kids who had been shouting STM before were now leading the whole arena in a victory chant. STM, STM, STM. The chant echoed through every row. Some fans banged on the barriers. Others wiped tears from their eyes like they had just seen the best show ever. In the ring, Richard still hadn't moved. 2 medical people came in quietly. Another referee knelt beside him. His shiny belt was forgotten on the floor. It wasn't just that Richard lost the belt. It was how he lost. The unbeatable giant had been taken down, and everyone saw it live on TV. People in the upper seats shouted down, "That's what real looks like." The camera caught an old man, maybe 60 years old, shaking his head and laughing softly to himself. "Hollywood," he said. Backstage, things were crazy. Cameras everywhere, reporters asking questions, and the crew whispering like something very special had happened. Jason was nowhere to be seen. But Richard was sitting on a folding chair, surrounded by medics. He stared at the floor, holding a towel to his mouth where a small cut had dried with blood. His eyes looked glassy and far away. Reporters asked, "Richard, what happened out there? Do you feel sorry for calling out Jason? Was he tougher than you thought?" Richard didn't say anything. Someone gave him a microphone to say something quick, but he pushed it away and walked off, limping, jaw tight, face red with shame. This wasn't a walk of a sore loser. It was a man who knew he had brought the attention, and Jason took it away. Now Richard wouldn't be remembered as the strongest, but as the one who got quieted. Meanwhile, in a small hallway near the fans' exit, Jason Statham stood alone with the kids who had cheered him from the front row. They had run backstage and asked security to let them see him. Jason nodded and waved them over. He signed every phone, shirt, and ticket they gave him. No big speeches, no big show. Just a small smile and a calm, quiet, "You boys got heart." One kid, maybe 14 years old, looked up and said, "You're the real deal, man. You're what everyone pretends to be." Jason smiled and said, "Remember that," while patting the boy's shoulder. Then he gave them a signed glove, the one with scars from the fight, and walked out the side door. No cameras, no flashes. Just Jason disappearing into the night like a real-life hero. Before Jason even reached the parking lot, videos of the fight were already all over the internet. "Statham destroys Titan" was trending in minutes. Someone posted a slow-motion video of the final punch with cool music. Within 10 minutes, it had 100,000 likes. Sports podcasts, movie sites, and fight channels called it "the night the actor beat the champ." Reddit threads exploded with fans saying, "Jason isn't acting anymore. Titan folded like a chair." This wasn't wrestling. It was real. And at the center of every video, every meme, every shocked replay, was Jason. Standing still, breathing heavy, looking like the only man in the whole building who didn't need to prove anything. Because he already did. In a world that loves noise, flash, and big shows, real toughness is different. It doesn't show off. It doesn't ask for applause. It doesn't tell everyone what it's going to do. Jason never grabbed the spotlight that night. He just stood still while the spotlight came to him. While Richard roared, flexed, and shouted, Jason breathed, moved, and answered with action. Because true courage isn't about talking loud before the fight. It's about standing tall when the last punch hits. Richard had the crowd, the belt, the microphone. Jason had one thing: presence. And that presence changed everything. He reminded everyone watching, fans, TV viewers, and kids at home, that strength isn't shown by shouting. It's shown by being calm, smart, and right on time. And when the moment came, Jason delivered quietly, completely, and for sure. The arena might forget what Richard shouted. They might forget who held the belt. But they will never forget the night Silence walked into the ring and made more noise than anyone else. Some men chase the spotlight. Others become it. If you like this story, tell me in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more fun adventures and mysteries. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.